Welcome to Dirshu Daf HaYomi Bahalacha. Today we are going to be continuing in Siman Vav, Din Birchas Asher Yatzar, the bracha of Asher Yatzar after one uses the bathroom, as well as Velo Kai Neshama Uperushav, as well as its explanations and interpretations. There are 4 sifim. Yesterday we saw sif aleph. Today we're going to continue and see sif beis. The 3 questions that we're going to be addressing in today's class, first of all, is when is the opportune time to recite Al Natilas Yadayim? The second question is what is the purpose of reciting Tehillim before davening? And the last question for today, must one hear the entire bracha in order to be Yotzei to fulfill their obligation? So let's start off, as we always do, with the words of the Mechaber. Yesh nohagim, there are those who have the custom, lahamtin levarech al natilas yadayim ad bo'am beis hachnesas. Even though they may have went to the bathroom at home, they're noyig to wait until they go into the shul and to say Asher Yatzar there. Umesadrim oisim al imshar habrachos. So, for example, those who have the art scroll sitter, you have the bracha of Al Natilas Yadayim, and then right afterwards the bracha of Asher Yatzar. So some people will have the minhag to actually say it in shul, and not when they're home. Uvnei Svard lo nahagu kain. However, the Sephardic tradition is not so. So let's look in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, lahamtin, which is brought down Kabbalah Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, that HaYotzi mebeso, a person who leaves his house and goes to a shul, koidim shisbalel yomer pasuk Shema Yisrael. Interesting, he has the minhag that we should say Shema Yisrael even before davening. And he says a person should, of course, not have kavanah to fulfill their obligation by just saying that one pasuk, as we'll be saying it as part of davening. Skipping down a few lines, it says, so that's only if you're going to go to shul right away. So therefore, okay, if you don't say Asher Yatzar at home, you wake up and you go to shul immediately afterwards. So we're talking maybe 10 minutes later, so you're going to be saying Asher Yatzar in shul. Let's say a person doesn't daven right away, but first they learn Torah. If let's say there is a interruption of conversation, and in that situation, if only later you go to shul, then certainly that's not proper. So the only time we allow you to say the bracha at shul is when there's not such a great hefsek. However, if let's say you wash your hands, let's say Asher Yatzar, and go to the bathroom at home, and then you decide to stay at home for another hour, or you decide to learn Daf HaYomi or whatever, Daf HaYomi Bahalacha, so then all of a sudden, much later on, you go to shul, so that's not acceptable. In that case, you should say the bracha right away because it's a hefsek. Al Kain, Osim Shomrim Tehillim Koidim Al Natilas Yadayim. Those who say Tehillim before they wash, because as we mentioned, there's some people who are noyig that they recite Tehillim before davening, but if you do that and you didn't yet say the bracha of Al Natilas Yadayim, well, Yafeh Moisim. It's not good. You should certainly say the bracha of Al Natilas Yadayim. The Havi Hefsek Gadol. And the Lavush writes, Osim Shomrim Tehillim Toiv Yoitzish Shomer Koidim Atfilah. He actually says it's better that a person should make sure to say Tehillim before, and the Biurim Musafim explains the reason, but we're going to read it right here. People who wish to recite Tehillim should preferably do so before Shachars. The words of Tehillim can prevent prosecuting forces from obstructing the Tfilos. This concept is alluded to by the fact that Tehillim are referred to as Zmiros, songs, sourced from the word Zomer, to cut down. So when a person is involved in harvesting, they do Zemer, which is harvesting. So it's interesting. These songs have the same connection as harvesting, which means it's cutting down negative forces. So that the notion also is when a person sings, it elevates you and it removes negative feelings. Some Achronim say that only Tehillim which are recited as songs of praise should be said before davening. Reciting them as tefillah should be done after davening. If the prakim of Psukei Zimra happen to be recited in the course of saying Tehillim before davening, they can and should be resaid between Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach. So if, let's say, you're noying, let's say, to say all of Sefer Tehillim in the course of a month, and you get to certain sections which are also part of Psukei Zimra, doesn't mean, I can skip it when I get to Psukei Zimra. No, you still have to say it in Psukei Zimra, so you're just saying a second time, which is not a problem. Okay, so it's interesting again, the inyan of Psukei Zimra, which is Zemer, which also comes to the word to cut down. Zaymer is to cut down. And that's the whole notion of singing in general, so therefore it cuts down the negativity and it is able to be proper preparations, hachanos, for tefillah. Okay, so that was one of our questions. Let's continue now with the words of the Ramah. Certainly you don't make two brachos, once at home and then shul. And he explains, if you have a minhag to say the bracha in one of the two places, you don't do in the other. Let's say a person learns Torah before, as we said in the Mishnah Berurah, that it's a hefsek gadol, therefore you have to say the bracha, otherwise it's too much of a separation. Says that there are people that are night that still are instituted as part of the tefillah in shul. Okay, so let's look in the Mishnah Berurah. Lo nahagu kain. So he says that lo nahagu kain v'haskamas achrayim linhag ka'anchi svard. That again, according to Ashkenaz, they say it is part of tefillah, but it says, but not the v'nei svard lo nahagu kain, which of course Rabbi Yosef Kar was svard. So the Skamas Akrainim says we should hold like the svard. Shul hasig lachatchila bin berchas al netilas yadayim b'netila. Lachatchila, you should wash on the netilas yadayim at home and say the bracha at home. El miyad shenaytel yadav tzarich haberach netilas yadayim. Ach im be'esh shenaytel yadav hu tzarich al nekeva. Let's say you also have to use the bathroom. You have to wash your hands, use the bathroom. So ein lo levarach al netilas yadayim ad sheyasa srach v'yivarach al netilas yadayim v'asher yatzar. Quoting the words of the Shari Tshuva, so you don't say Asher Yatzar until after you've already used the bathroom, because once a person has a hargasha that need to use the bathroom and they can't wait for an extended period of time, we'll see how long that is again, so then a person should use the bathroom first and then only afterwards say Asher Yatzar. And al Tishadayim. Quoting the words of the Chai Adam, he says, L'chatchil toim yoser toiv l'hamtin l'varach al netil shidayim acher shemenaka atzmai. Make sure you're completely clean, and therefore afterwards you'll be yotzel whole days. Okay, so some people are known to say it in the home. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even a shliach tzibur who makes the bracha in his house, he could only say it one time also, even though he's maybe saying it for the sake of others. Everyone's an expert, everyone knows how to say that bracha. No one's fulfilling their obligation by hearing it from the Shliach Tzibur anyway. So if you, the Shliach Tzibur, already said the bracha al netil shadayim at home, don't say it in shul. And of course, this is why the minhag Ashkenaz generally is to start by brachos, asher nasan l'sachvi. They don't say the bracha of asher yatzar al netil shadayim, typically during most of the time of the year. We're bikim b'davar, and perhaps it's also to alleviate the issue that there are some people are noyig that they say this bracha at home. But then he mentions that during there's a minhag in the Yomim Naroyim that the Shliach Tzibur would say all brachos, which apparently even includes al netil shadayim and asher yatzar. Everything was said. So what should he do in that situation? So in that case, he says, if you're normally knowing to make the bracha at home, don't make a bracha at home, because you know during Yom Ra'im, if you're the one who leads that part of the davening, you're going to have to say it out loud, and therefore you don't want to repeat it. Let's see what he did. So you should find someone who's going to listen, who hasn't yet fulfilled the mitzvah, that he should have kavanah to fulfill his bracha through you, which again is through the notion of shemei ka'ona. He says that you have to be careful lashmiya kol lashon habracha, if you hear the whole thing. The little commotion ohagim be'ezam makom she'ashatz mashmiya rak lashon techilas habracha v'seifa, that you only hear is part of it. Kivan shekavanaso oz mahabracha lohaitzi tzarcha shemei lishmoi kol lashon bracha. You have to hear the entire bracha. This means that one must hear the entire bracha in order to be yotzei. Okay, so let's address this question first. So on this, the Biur Musafin says, "She'im dilig eza teva meikar bracha." If you miss one word, shel yotzei de chavasai kivan shehu mishan matbei shetav chachamim. You have to say the bracha exactly the way the chachamim said, otherwise it's an issue. The imlo shama mehamavayrich. If you didn't hear from the mavarich the word atah, or you didn't hear the word tevas Hashem, but maybe you did hear Elokeinu or Lehefech, so he says later on, L'gabe mavarich shedilei kach shebedi eved enum akev. That b'di eved, it's okay. So again, must one hear the entire bracha in order to be yotzei? So this is what we say. One must listen to another person's recitation of a bracha and be yotzei his obligation of saying the bracha. This concept, known as shomei ka'ona, applies if the listener heard all the primary words of the bracha. If he misses words which are not essential, he is still yotzei. Some achronim say that if one intends to be yotzei through another person but misses some of the non-essential words, he should choose before the bracha is completed not to be yotzei through that recitation. He will then be able to recite the bracha properly himself. Otherwise, he will be yotzei in a b'di'evet fashion, and the bracha will not be able to be repeated, because if you're yotzei, you're yotzei. You can't say the bracha, it's bracha she'en tzarach. This rule applies even if the only purpose of saying the bracha was to be moitzi the listener. Okay. Now the last question that we asked is, when is the opportune time to recite Al Natilas Yadayim? So it's written down in the Biur Musafim number 7 that later on it's written, Shim yochel hamidas atzmo ad shir parsa. The person needs to use the bathroom, but you're able to hold yourself back for the amount of time to walk a parsa. Mutar b'miras divrei Torah v'brachos. You're allowed to learn Torah. The achar kach hevi as das ha-shar tshuva shehichmer b'zeh. The shar tshuva is even strict. Even if it was more than a parsa, you should still use the bathroom first. Amnam. Let's say you're at the end of davening, of Psukah Zimran, you're about to go to Baruch Hu, and you have this taiva to use the bathroom. Also loimer Baruch Hu. You can't say Baruch Hu. Hivan shu inyan acher. Since it's an inyan acher, no one can say. Okay, so there's some people are makel when it comes to the shear of a parsa. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes a custom of the Bnei Sfarad to recite the bracha al Natilas Yadayim immediately after washing, mainly in their home. Many Ashkenazic poskim sanction this custom, except in cases where a person needs to relieve himself and cannot recite a bracha at that time. So of course that you would not say the bracha at home. In such cases, a person should wash again after relieving himself and recite the bracha then. So let's say a person washes their hands, but instead of saying Al Natilas Yadayim, if that's what normally is your midig at home, but if you have a little bit of a feeling you need to use the bathroom a little bit, so let's say it's not an issue about the shak, so you go to shul, use the bathroom there, and then you can wash a second time. That's when you would say Al Natilas Yadayim, because you wouldn't be able to say Al Natilas Yadayim at home because you had to have a hargasha of wanting to use the bathroom. Other achronim hold that it is best to recite the bracha only once a person is ready for shacharis. Those who recite the bracha at that point should say Al Natilas Yadayim together with the other Berachas HaShachar. A person may recite the bracha at the point, even if he knows that he will need to use the bathroom again before Kriya Shema and Shmona Esrei. Ad Kan.